Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the AuctionChatter podcast and another episode of AuctionChatter here on AuctionChatter. And as always, on these episodes, I'm going to be joined by Moshe Maimon. This episode of AuctionChatter is dedicated to discussing Legacy Judaica. They've been on this program before, but this is about their forthcoming auction, which is going to take place November 3rd, 2024. And interestingly, Legacy, so like most auction houses, they're online at BidSpirit. You can register now. You can bid already, of course. But also, and that's going to be November 3rd at 1 p.m. But also, Legacy is also in person in Lakewood at Estrella, 978 River Avenue, Lakewood, New Jersey, 08701. So if someone just wants to see how an auction takes place, I think we've mentioned in the past when we talked about Legacy, many auction houses either just are online automated or they're in Eretz Yisrael. So if someone's interested in the Lakewood area, you want to see how the auction takes place, you can come and check it out. As with other auctions in the past, we just run through different items. We'll discuss some items, mentioning items that are of interest to us. We'll mention some of the more expensive items. We'll mention some of the others. Now, this is a big catalog. There's also some Judaica, some silver, and some other things. So we'll mention some of those as well. But there's a lot. I think the total items, is around 249. So we're not going to get through all. I'm not going to mention everything. Check out the catalog. There's a beautiful printed catalog. It's available in stores, or you can reach out. Maybe they mail it Legacy. You can also, obviously, check out everything on BidSpirit. There's a link in the show's notes. So we're not going to go through everything. But I'll try to mention some items here or there. There's a lot of very nice items with very nice starting prices. Maybe I'll mention prices, maybe not, something else we've done in the past. The thing is, it's always a fluid situation. People are bidding, prices are going up. But just to give you a sense sometimes of what the ballpark is, at least where it started, it might not be actually at the time. So with that introduction, thank you very much for joining me once again.
Thank you very much. Great to be back. And again, this is, like you said, 249 items of a very broad range. There's something in here for everybody. There's antiques and cannabulum. There's, like you said, there's art. A lot of colorful items which we hope to share with our audience. And terrific to be here with you again.
Okay, I also want to mention that with Legacy, I mentioned this on the sponsorship they did on the previous episode, on Sunday's episode, that Rabbi Yehuda Schwartz, who I know, Ramesh, I know you know as well, a very upstanding, fine fellow. I will mention that. I do know him personally. So I just thought it's worth mentioning here in this context.
Sure.
Okay, so this auction catalog, I think we'll start off with discussing. There's a bunch of really nice classics in the beginning, but as always, some things we've discussed in the past, some things we'll discuss in the future, some things we'll leave for a different time. But one item that caught my eye, Rosh Hashanah caught your eye, is Lot 10, Midbar Yehuda, the first edition, Venice 1602. This is, Midbar is probably also play on Medaber. This is the sermons of Yehuda Ari Modena. And he actually says, I think he says in his autobiography, that even the priests used to come listen to his speeches.
He made his bones as a preacher. That's his primary occupation was his preaching, which in Italy, in Renaissance Italy, that had reached its height, and it was a very, very a lot of the great rabbis did publish their drushes, and he was considered a foremost darshan. Later, darshanim would say, to get a good sense of how and what to preach, take a look, use this sefer. So it was a very popular sefer, and this was, there's a lot of rabbinical glosses on this, so you can see that rabbis made good use of this particular sefer.
Yeah, and it's something, it's a pretty, I guess I would say famous for those. It was actually redone once by Misha, but then I don't think that's really around anymore. So that's one item, a very nice classic. Again, just to give you that opening bid is at $400. Lot 13 is a beautiful edition of Shalosh Tshuvas B'Yom Mizrahi. This is, pretty famous. The Mizrahi, he's famous for his work on Rashi, but there's also Tshuvas. This has been redone by Zichron Aaron. There's a new edition now, but there's some famous Tshuvas in here.
This is a major sefer because the Mizrahi was a Rav in Constantinople, but he was from the pre-Girush Sfarad community of Constantinople, which is like Bnei Groima, the Romaniotas, they were called in Spanish by the new emigres. And this sefer, like it advertised on the Shar blot that there's tshuvas in here from Rabboni Sfarad, Tzarfas, Ashkenaz. Besides for the rabbi himself, so he's a telltale piece. This is where all the questions are going here because the major the Girish the major portion of the Girush Sfard lands up in Turkey, and this rabbi he's the Chacham Bashi, he's the chief rabbi, so he's like the epicenter of halachic response going on back and forth. And the Sefer is, of course, an instant classic, and it remains a classic to this very day.
Yeah, Rabbi Mizrahi is 1450 to 1526, so he's right in that expulsion time period where a lot of the Girush Sfarad end up moving to Muslim part of the world, which is Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. He's there. He's pre-Girush Sfarad. Eventually, the Sfarad take it over. We've probably discussed this in other contexts, and this has come up on the podcast a number of times. So he's really kind of straddling both worlds, kind of in his own world, and of course, very famous. So this is a really nice classic. This is a beautiful leather binding. This is an opening bid of $2,000. It's
a classic, and any of the tshuvas discussed in this sefer, which are a very broad ranging tshuvas, very communal oriented. You learn a lot about the history from this sefer. But any of these topics that are discussed, anybody who discusses them after them always has to refer to the Mizrahi. It's that kind of sefer. So it's a classic, definitely a corner piece of anyone building an Oitzer and wants the classics. Grab this item.
Yeah, there's that, and there's a number of classics, and I think it's worth mentioning a couple of the classics. Another classic that comes up, you definitely see it from time to time, is Lot 19, which is the Avnei Miluim. The Avnei Miluim, famously of the Ksais HaChoshen, and the same author by Leib Heller. And the Avnei Miluim, one of the classics, this is published, just to give you when this is published, in Lemberg in 1816, 1826, one of Lemberg's Zolkova. But the interesting thing about the Avnei Miluim, so the Avnei Miluim is the Magia, I guess for those that know, is Shir. The Ksais' only Eidim, his only son-in-law, Shlomo Yehuda Rappaport, who was one of the Rosh Maskilim. He ends up becoming Rav in Prague. And what's interesting here, in this catalog, which as we're talking, flipping through, trying to find, there is also another item. I think it's worth mentioning in this context, because the shir he wrote for his wife, who again was the Ksais' only daughter. He wrote the matzeva, the nusach on the matzeva, and the handwritten nusach is in here in this auction.
You're looking for lot 196 now.
That's correct. Thank you very much. That's lot 196. It's a beautiful hand, and it's signed at the bottom. So I assume the top is also written by Shir, but the bottom it says in it, you can see it's signed Solomon Rappaport, and it's written. They have it all. It's in a beautiful handwriting, and you can see. I mean, it is on the kever, as my understanding today in Prague. And I don't remember when I was in Prague if I saw this. Shir's kever has been redone. It was defaced and ruined. Now they redid it. But that's in the same cemetery he's buried a couple rows over. It's the same part where it's the second cemetery in Prague where the Ned Yehuda was a Fleckl, etc. is buried. That's where Shir is buried.
I think it's definitely written in his hand. It's the not his typical rabbinic writing. This is the Rashi letters, which he used for more official writing. It's easier for other people to decipher. What's interesting here is that he writes about him, his own name. He calls himself Harav Shlomo Yehuda Leib Kohen Rappaport, but in another hand, in this time in script, someone added in the Mem Vav Hey Morenu Harav, not just Harav. I wonder if that's someone else that added that in. But this is certainly the Rashi writing that I recognize from a sefer of his in this very library.
Yes, I do have one. That's true. So I should have compared it to know. But he does have. He talks about his wife, Hanaima. Harabanas Maras Freda Zal Bas Harav Hagoyin Hamuvuk Hamefursim Harav Rabbeinu Aryeleb Hakoyin Heller Zal Avbez and Kal Kodesh. I'm trying to read his handwriting over there, and he says, and he talks about him.
Sitraya.
Oh, right, that's where he was rough. And he talks about him, Mechaber Ksais HaChoshen, Shev Shmaitzav, Avnei Miluim, and then there you say Eishes Harav, and that's what he added in the Mem Vav Hey. And you can see this by this on page 132 in the printed catalog. They have it beautifully printed here. You can see it online. Really nice, and he goes through. This is what he wrote for his wife. So it's definitely a very nice, unique item. So that item is starting at $1,500. But the connection to Lot 19, which is a classic Avnei Miluim, is that the Avnei Miluim, the Magia, is Shir. Lot 20 is another classic, Shal Shuvas Per Asik, Venice, 1674. And so this is an interest. This is a classic. This famous, I think we've probably discussed this in the past, is one about the beard. The Roman Fano had a beard. He didn't have a beard. Or basically Ergas and Shal Shuvas Divriyas is upset about it. The Chassam Sofer famously says, he goes with the Eidos, they didn't have one. There's also a tshuva about not saying, I think it's Tikkun Chatzos, is that what it is? He's talking about by Shapsei Tzvi, by Shapsei Tzvi. So there's some interesting tshuvas in here. It was actually recently redone by Machon Moshe Sabaron.
This sefer also, the tshuvas in this sefer, attracted some negative attention as well, which also makes it for interesting reading, because for some reason that a lot of the sides and positions he takes are at odds with the establishment, so to speak. And one famous quip that was said about the Sefer is that it's called Be'eresa ki his askuima, because it's very cantankerous and always fighting with everybody, but it's a very interesting Sefer, also a classic.
I think Rebbe Ergas might say that. Rebbe Ergas is in Divrei Yosef. I don't remember what shuv it is. He might be the one to say that, so you can check it there. Some other classics here. Lot 26 is Chedush Reb Chaim Halevi, first edition, Brisk 1936. There's just flipping through just to mention some. Again, I'm not by any means mentioning everything here. Lot 37. And some of these items, again, I'll say price. I'm not, but Lot 37 is something that's modest opening bid of $150. It's a late item. It's Sefer HaTvuna, both volumes, New York, 1947. This is a journal published by the Mir Yeshiva right when they came to New York. There's some interesting things to say about this. I think Moshe have what to say about it.
It's a very interesting item. Now this is where the old Mir Talmidim are kind of establishing themselves in America after arriving. There's a lot of discussion about who gets the credit for reestablishing Torah in America, and Reb Aaron, of course, features very prominently in any of those discussions, and there's Tells and there's others. But one, people often tend to overlook one small yeshiva, but a very important yeshiva, and that's Beis HaTalmud. Beis HaTalmud is really where the Mirs go. There's Reb Avram Kamenovich who establishes the Mir Yeshiva in Brooklyn, but the Mir Yeshiva has just a few faculty members from the mirrors, the actual mirrors who spent the war years in Shanghai and came over to America, but the bulk of them established their own yeshiva in Brooklyn, and that yeshiva is Beis HaTalmud, and Beis HaTalmud is headed by Rabbi Maimon, and all the old, the Aroya Sheba Chabura, as they're called, they're all learning in Beis HaTalmud. It kind of has a more subtle influence on America because they don't take American boys, and it's not boys coming out of American high schools now joining Beis HaTalmud. Few and very chashuva ones did join, but primarily it's just the pristine Mir Yeshiva now in America, and this is their publishing efforts, which Reb Leib Malin is behind this. So it's a very high quality Torah, as you would expect. There's only these two issues came out, these two Svarim, and apparently they were first issued as paperbacks. So these are the original ones, and in there's a lot of Torah from Rabbi Yeruchim. There's essays from Reb Leib Malin. A very famous essay, which is an important essay, is Reb Leib talking about the Holocaust. And of late, Rabbi Victor Miller has attracted a lot of maybe negative attention for his position on the Holocaust, where he talks about how the Holocaust was Hashem's retribution for the wide-scale assimilation. And some people say, no, you can't say that, and that's it's spitting on the memory of the Kedoshim of the Holocaust, yada yada. But what is important is that Rabbi Leib Malin, who lost friends and family, and of course, his entire world was destroyed. Now he's in America. He has a similar slant, not exactly the same, but his slant is because the Jewish people had abandoned the yeshivas, and because they had abandoned the yeshivas, that is why Hashem chose to bring the Holocaust. So you see also this is right after the Holocaust, and he's and he doesn't shy away from looking for a justification, so to speak, of the terrible Midas Hadin that was the Holocaust. So I think that it's an important, often overlooked Ma'ar. I know I had this discussion with Eliezer Brati, and he considers this to be a very important Ma'ar as well. So, and again, there's Torah there from Reb Zelig and Reb Ali Chazan and Ephraim Mordechai Ginsburg, Reb Nachum Bartzovitz and Reb Shmuel Brudny. A lot of the there's Torah there from the Yonas Elam. I recently was involved in helping republish the Yonas Elam, but the initial offerings were in this Sefer. It's considered, if you're into the history of the American yeshivas, this is certainly a very, very historical and chashuva item.
It's interesting. So that piece from Reb Leib, it's been reprinted in one of the, I don't think it's in the regular Chedush Reb Leib, I think it's in one of the other volumes. I think they reprinted it. But what's interesting is, also you mentioned Reb Leib didn't shy away in 1947 to write that. Rabbi Victor Miller, his Divine Madness, as you mentioned, whether it's controversial or whatever, I remember when I read it in the introduction, the editor writes that Rabbi Victor Miller, he put it in a drawer and gathered dust, and he just sat in a drawer, and he didn't print it. I think for that reason, he didn't want to print it. There's a lot of Holocaust survivors in that generation. He held off, but Reb Leib, he had no problem writing this in this journal, publishing it.
It should be noted that perhaps there's a difference. Reb Leib himself, somewhat a victim of the Holocaust, can people will be quicker to excuse him for giving his opinions on it rather than the American-born Victor Miller. But of course, Das Torah is Das Torah.
Right, but Avigdor was in Europe.
He
wasn't
was.
that?
He learned in
He
yeshivas in
definitely
Europe.
had friends that perished in Holocaust.
Of course, he certainly did. Yeah, and he mentions them too.
Right, but I hear. So that is lot 37. It's both volumes of this paperback Hatfuna. Lot 38, I should have mentioned before, it goes back to lot 19 and 196. There's a connection. It's Ksais HaChoshen. It's part 2, though. It's only the first edition, Lemberg, 1795. This is printed during the Ksais' lifetime. That's interesting. Again, there's some other interesting stuff here. There's some really nice, classics worth looking through, definitely for those interested. Lot 44 is a Mishnah Berurah. It's a complete set. It's 4 volumes of the first edition, Warsaw 1895-1907, and it has Muga, as many of the Chafetz Chaim Svarim do.
Yeah, this is the Muga, very famous Muga, and this is the full set, which was in 4 volumes. Today we're used to thinking of the 6-volume print, but although they are 6 volumes, they were printed in 4 volumes, and this is a full set.
Lot 45 is connected, though, because Lot 45 is the Mishnah Berurah. That has the variant with the Haskama of the Nefesh Chaya, and then this Haskama does not appear after on. It was removed. And there's some, remember, for the Chafetz Chaim removed it got removed. So that is in Lot 45, where you can see that in Lot 45. So continuing along with the ocean, and like I said, this is a 249 items. There's many items in this catalog that are definitely worth discussing. So Lot 45. Lot 58 is interesting. Lot 58 is Tashbats. This is Amsterdam 1738. What's interesting about it, many times, and this is an opening bid of $350, which is pretty cheap for this beautiful, it's a famous Tashbats with a beautiful title page. But this one, a lot of these, originally this was in a fish binding, the fish skin binding. It's famous. You see it a lot of times comes up. And so that's why it's more money. This one is a little less. So if someone's looking for a Mitzia, it's here. It's a beautiful copy of the Tshuvas Tashbats.
I'm going to go back just to mention Lot 57, the one right before that. Lot 57 has a lot of interest if you have an historical interest. So these kind of publications are very interesting. It's the Takana from the Chevra of Megadle Yisayimim. The old communities in Europe, all across Europe, and in Italy, in Spanish Europe, and Eastern European, the community was built of smaller little sub communities, sub chevras. The chevra and these chevras, their jobs always was what they contribute to the community. That's what defined a chevra. There was the chevra that was the Bikur Cholim. There was the chevra that was the Halvoyas Hames, and this chevra was being metapel with Yisrael, with orphans. And these are the takanas of their chevra, the minutes of their meetings and their regulations. There's so much to learn. These are somewhat rare, such items. But this is from the particular one of the Megadle Yisrael in Amsterdam in 1738. And there's a lot to learn about the going-ons of the community. And maybe not a bad idea if our communities would start becoming a little more inward and focused on little societies that improve the benefit of the community.
Adopting bylaws. I mean, these are bylaws. And the only one you really see today still is the Chevra Kadisha. I mean, that's where the Chevra Kadisha came from. Gemilas Chasadim. There used to be a Chevra Gemilas Chasadim, Bikur Cholim. So these things do have their echoes, are still left today. But Chevra Kadisha is the only one I think that's really left. It's just, I don't even know the Chevra Kadisha has like a society. Some of these societies used to get together and learn. There was learning. There was Chevra for Balei Batim that have once a week in Amsterdam, especially. This is printed in Amsterdam. This Lot 57 in 1781. So this is something that goes on in Europe, and this would happen. Germany had many of these chevras, I guess called, and really today, again, besides Chevra Kadisha, you really don't have these specific chevras. I mean, that has to do with also a conversation for a different time about how the Jewish community was its own community, governed by itself. The Rabbanim had the power of Chayr. I mean, these are things that totally changed. Shortly after this, really, when it totally came to a head with Napoleon and emancipation, and everything really changed.
A lot of these chevras, though, did persist, and I'll just mention from my history, my family hails from Seattle. There's the great, there's 2 major communities there. There's the Ashkenazic Bikur Cholim community, and right across the street is the Sephardic Bikur Cholim shul, which is where my grandfather was the rabbi. And people wonder, why does Seattle, are there so many sick people in Seattle? Why does the 2 main shuls in Seattle are both called Bikur Cholim? And the answer is they both come from societies in Europe. In the case of the Sephardic shul, it's from Turkey, and in the case of the Ashkenazi shul from Eastern Europe, they came here and this chevra is the one that founded the shul, so they named the shul after their chevra. So those chevras are long gone, but the names still live on. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something interesting. So there is that. Lot 63 is the Diaris Dvash first edition. I think I skipped. Moshe pointed me Tfuna, which is lot 59, a different Tfuna. This is the last sefer published in Communist Russia. This is in 1926. That's lot 59.
What's amazing about this sefer, this is Rabbi Kraslishchikov. I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but he after the rise of communism, this is like I said, the last sefer published in Communist Russia. After he survived the war in Siberia. But after the war, he became an accountant in Moscow, an accountant by day and the pult of a rav at night. Hidden from the eyes of the KGB, he would sit and learn and write and write and write. He wrote a 20,000-page Chibur on Yerushalmi, and he also wrote a second chelik to this Tvuna. This is the first chelik, which is on Rambam. There's another chelik on Rambam, which was published by Rabbi Bronstein. Rabbi Bronstein was an American rabbi who would go to Europe, and get in and try to help the remnant of the Jewish community in Russia. And the chief rabbi of Moscow once took him to a hospital to visit old Rabbi Kraslishchikov in the hospital, and he was very worried that some of the nurses were secret KGB agents. But when he was able to talk to Rabbi Bronstein, he said, "Look under my pillow." He had smuggled into the hospital his the second, his manuscript of the second volume of Tvuna, and he begged him to get it out of Russia and publish it. And Rabbi Bronstein said, "I can't promise I'll get it out, but if I get it out, I'll publish it." And he did manage. And the very next day, this rabbi passed away. But he did manage to get it out. And then over the years, he was able to smuggle out also the 20,000 pages on Yerushalmi, which were also published. So this is a real survival story of Torah in the darkest times, and amazing guy. It's considered a very good Pirush on Yerushalmi too, by the way, the Tvuna. But this is the Sefer Tvuna, the first volume from this rabbi.
Jumping ahead to lot 68. So this is where the section polemisim starts, and that's always fun. I like also when catalogs split it up and they write different sections, different parts. So polemics. Lot 68, Agana Soyer, an international dateline. Moshe, I know there's something you read. I haven't read this. So this is Reb Chaim Zimmerman.
Reb Chaim Zimmerman, I first found this in the RJJ library. By the way, I learned at Edison Yeshiva. The RJJ library was an excellent library because a lot of American rabbis would leave their estates to RJJ. So there was a copy of the Agan Asar in the yeshiva, and I once pulled it off the shelf. It's a very noticeable sefer because it's 3 inches thick. It's like a huge sefer written on very strong quality paper, and it's numbered inside, right? It says this is copy number whatever of 350 copies or so. I forget the exact number, but it was a very limited edition. This is the year after the Chazon Ish died. Reb Chaim Zimmerman took it upon himself to like, so to speak, avenge the honor of the Chazon Ish against the attacks, the perceived attacks in his mind of Reb Menachem Kasher, who had rejected the Chazon Ish's opinion about the international dateline, which is a huge, fascinating topic in and of itself. You have to cover that one day, Nachi, if you haven't already. But so the Chazon Ish
read up on it first. But yeah,
this is one place to start. So Reb Chaim Zimmerman wrote this huge treatise attacking Rabbi Kasher and defending the Chazon Ish, but he knew that the subject is so arcane that very few people will be able to understand it. So he made it in a very limited run, and which now makes them highly sought after collectibles. I found my copy for $4 in a used farm store, and I consider that one of the best finds I've ever had.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, I think has it been reprinted?
I think he himself issued in a smaller, not such a grandiose publication, but he himself did issue one. I remember hearing from Rabbi Shulman, Shmario Shulman. He's very good friends with Reb Chaim Zimmerman, and he said even he had to pay $50 for the original one, but he was such a shud because later he printed a runoff copy, but that's not the collectible one.
Lot 70 is a Masechta Shabbos. This is Vilna 1836. There's a polemic, as they say, Divrei Emes v'Tzedek regarding Slavita Vilna dispute. This is when the Vilna and Slavita is fighting, Litvaks and Chassidim and Betashas. I mean, that's really not the context here, but there's a piece in here printed about it. So this is it's missing the first title page. Is worth pointing out. This one, printed by the Rum Press, but it is fascinating part of a polemic that many people know about at least a little bit.
It's a major milestone in Eastern European history. This is a kind of to some extent Hasidim versus Misnagdim, because the Slavita print is a Hasidic press from the Shapiro brothers, and it's considered by all objective standards. The Shas happened to be beautiful. The Dikduke Soy from Litvak or Nosson Rabinovich, but he says that by all accounts the Slavita Shas is just unparalleled in its beauty. But the Slavita Shas went through a few different Mahaduras, a few different runs. They had, like printers did, in order to protect their interests, they would get Rabbanim to sign. This was probably the original purpose of the Haskama, not just to extol the virtues of the people publishing it, but also to protect their rights. And they got the Rabbanim, including the Baal Tanya and others, to sign a document saying that for 25 years, the numbers here in the catalog are different. Maybe the story is more complex than I'm remembering it. But from my recollection, is about 1807 or so. They got a 25-year ban for anyone else to print the Shas. Because if someone else prints a Shas, all their investment goes to pot. So they were going to invest a huge amount of money and effort in printing the Shas. Therefore, they got a ban on anyone else printing a Shas for 25 years. Now, they went through 3 prints, and they were starting their 4th print around 1835 or so, probably a little before that, because this is maybe about 1835. They were just about to start their 4th print when Vilna started their famous Shas, which later became the standard Shas, the Vilna Shas. That started in 1836, and right away this huge brouhaha erupts, because the Slavita printers said, even though we ran through all our prints, but we have 25 years. And the Rum brothers, the Rum print says no, nothing doing, because it was only the 25 years was only to protect your interests. But if you're done, you ran through it, you don't need any more protection, and now we're free to go. So this became a huge dispute with the Polish rabbis siding on the Slavita side typically, and the Lithuanian rabbis, including some German rabbis like the Chassam Sofer and Kiveger. Kiveger is the most prominent one. They side with the Vilna printers, and Slavita publishes. They published a letter accusing, they say Rabbi Kiveger is really old. He's not that interested. It's Rabbi Shleimeger, his son, who they called him a Ben Koziva. A Ben Koziva is the name the Chacham give for Bar Koichva, but the play on words here is he's the son of Koziva because just like Rabbi Kiva in the Gemara was deluded by into thinking that Bar Koichva was Mashiach. So here also Rabbi Kiva Eger, this Rabbi Kiva was also deluded by this Ben Koziva, and to side with the Vilna printers. And Rabbi Kiveger, the mild-mannered, the greatest Anav of all, but he erupts in fury. And this letter is printed in the edition of the Shas, where he says there's no mechila, it's a bezoyin kavanat Torah. How dare anyone say that my psak was just swayed by my son? Of course, this is my psak, this is the psak, and this is how it has to remain. So it's a very, very historical item.
And the mazel is that the Slavita Shas is not, and everybody today uses the Vilna Shas, from Hasidim to Litvaks, and everyone in between. Everybody uses the Vilna Shas as a template, so that is the standard Shas today. So, yeah. Right. Lot 71 is Melchemes Mitzvah, the Rashbash. This was printed in Leipzig, 1865, but is a polemic. What's interesting about this, just to mention, so the Rashbash is the son of the Tashbat, so we mentioned earlier. This is in response to Yeshua HaLorki, who is Haranamo di Santa Fe. When he converts to Christianity, this leads to the disputation of Tortosa in 1413-1414, and there was Prophet Duran, Yosef Albo on the other side, and this is a whole fight. And anyways, the Rashbash, who later on, he lived 1400 to 1467, he writes this response. That's what this Melchemes Mitzvah is.
What's unique about the disputation of Tortosa is that the disputants were not given the freedom to speak like the Ramban was, for example. The Ramban famously was allowed to say whatever he wants. The king extended his protection. That was not the case in Tortosa, and the rabbis were under very, very extreme duress not to be accused of heresy, so they couldn't say anything that would be interpreted as being offensive to Christianity. They really, really were up against the wall, and it was and the written record of the debate doesn't reflect favorably, obviously, on the rabbinical side, which is why the rebuttals published later, like this one, the Melchemes Mitzvah, were very important. This is the true position, and in the history of the Jewish Christian debate, this is a very important and famous item.
Lot 72 is something that we could spend probably a whole podcast on, and I actually have. It's almost one episode is dedicated to discussing this in my forthcoming series on the Zohar, the reception history of the Zohar. This is Matpachas Farim of Yaakov Emden, the first edition, Altona 1768, printed by Beis HaMachaber. Famous Rabbi Yaakov Emden had a printing press in his basement, in his house. It was like having social media. He went and he just published many things. What's fascinating about this copy, first of all, it looks like a beautiful copy with a new binding. It also has the stamp of the Klois in Altona. So the Klois that we sit and learn there in Altona, and this was, I guess, a Klois. Let's just loosely call it a Kol, to define what a Klois is without going into a Klois. And this was the copy in Altona. Altona is Ahu, Altona, Hamburg, Wandsbeck. This is where Yaakov Emden lived. This was where, and it has the stamp from this place. This is opening at $3,500. There's much to say on Mitbachas. I can go on and on and on. I don't want to spoil a lot of the series, so stay tuned for the series when you'll hear much more about Mitbachas. But just in broad strokes, Rabbi Yaakov Emden takes aim, really, I mean, there's no other way to say it, at the Zohar, and he critiques it extensively with glosses and other things. In the beginning, he does mention Sabbatians and Frankists, and he goes after them. And that's why he's doing it. And that's in the first part. In the second part, he famously talks about Mer Nevuchim. He says Mer Nevuchim, it's not the Rambam and other things. He says other quotes, but the Zohar, talking about the Zohar Rashbi or not. And Yaakov Emden comes up with a hypothesis that there's another B'Shem Bar Yochai, a later one with another, son Elazar. So he comes up with some other interesting. And, you can read it. The Chidah famously, Shem HaGedolim says, he only wrote it against Sabbatians. It can't be meant that. And again, I deal with this at length in this series. We'll discuss much more. It's well worth reading if you haven't. There's a lot of proofs, riots. He has different things. He also talks about different parts of the Zohar. There's all the different parts. There's the regular Zohar, the Rai Mehemna, Tikkunim. He ascribes some of it, famously to Moshe de Leon. He says, so there's many things in there. He brings various proofs that there's parts of it, he says, talk about Islam and Christianity, even though, Zohar was predated. He talks about Kuzari or other, famous philosophy things come out in there. He also talks about, there's the Zohar famously talks about, this is, I think, the most famous one in the Matbacha, so I guess it's worth discussing. He says, in the Raya Mehemna, in Parashas Kiseitze, it says, V'shchinta noiga v'noiga l'eshim hacha karil b'knishta Eish Noga or Es Noga. Now that's known famously in that's in Spanish, and I believe it's in Spanish, not Portuguese. But it's in Spanish or Portuguese, and this is something that they did, another time.
This is the name. This is what a shul was called.
It's correct. That Beloshan Sfardi is called Esnoga. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden goes off saying that this is Moshe de Leon in Spain or others. It says that this is what we know it is in Spanish, and so clearly this is not from Moshe Bar Yochai. How could this be? And he goes on and on. And that's in Perek Shlishi. It's the beginning of Perek Shlishi of Matbachas. And I mean that essentially just to Matbachas is there's just lengthy ha'oris on the Zohar, either full on just trying to make gears of changes, or he's attacking it. It's a pretty stark attack, especially when you read the end. You see what he says at the end. But I just want to say, I'm sure I know you've read it, and I'm sure many people have read it. But it's listen. I'll say just to mention here in this context, obviously, like I said, stay tuned for the episode and the miniseries. We'll discuss it much more in depth. But it's a very interesting sefer written by Rabbi Yaakov Emden. That's all. It's
the first of its kind, really, and a unique in its era. So completely unique, a work of critical scholarship on a canonical work in the Jewish tradition. It's an amazing. It's a standalone kind of sefer, and of course, anything Rabbi Yaakov Emden touches is going to be interesting. Even this, what's you think it's just going to a running critique of the Zohar, so it's not going to be interesting. He manages to touch every single possible kind of thing, Rishonim, Achronim, and Jewish history, and miracles, and Shadim, and everything. Everything gets covered. Everything gets touched by Yaakov Emden, and with an interesting, unique take that he's so famous for.
Yeah, and again, this item is owned by the Alton HaKloi, so that's fascinating. Lot 73 is Ar Yisrael. This is the polemic regarding the Kli V'Get. As we've seen this item in the past, and I'll refer everyone to Shuli Bornstein did a lengthy, he calls it raid bite, but that almost was like a shear, just on the Kli V'Get story and the Lumdus. So this is the sefer that was published by Rabbi Yisrael Lipschitz about the Kli V'Get, so you can check that out. That's another one. There's a couple of other, another one that's worth mentioning, something I had a podcast on, is Lot 75, Sefer Habris HaChodash. This is about the Sabbatian River. I'm not sure why it's by polemics exactly, but it's a fascinating sefer. I did a podcast on this with Professor Tzvi Ben-Dor Banit about my 10 Lost Tribes series. This was about somebody, Rabbi Uziel Haga of Boston, who we know nothing else about other than that he writes that. He says he went to President McKinley and he wanted to go permission to look in China to find the Chinese Jews. He went with the U.S. Armed Forces, but in the end, a really sad ending. This was the time of the Boxer Rebellion. I'm just giving the Cliff Notes version, by the way. Listen to that episode; it was long, over an hour, and he went to the Boxer Rebellion. That Boxer Rebellion, Rebecca. And he writes a whole letter back, and this was published in Europe. And this is all we have from him. He dies somewhere in prison. We don't know, and that's the end of him. So, unfortunately, sad demise. But it's a very interesting, and he talks about the Jews there are, Asar Shvatim, and he talks about their customs and different things they do, and so again. Look elsewhere for a more in-depth discussion, but this is Lot 75. It's a very interesting little sefer for those interested in checking out.
The next item is Lot 76, which is, again, a great historical, where halacha and history meet. This is a bunch of pamphlets published of the Shemitah controversy in 1909, 1910 is the Shemitah year. And this is the first Shemitah year after Eretz Yisrael has really experienced the wave of the new Aliyah, where a lot of European Jews now living in Eretz Yisrael. So the probably the last major controversy had been in 1889. That year, Shemitah was a big controversy, and this is the new renewed vigor and renewed interest. And two of these quotations are by the Ridvaz. Ridvaz was in Tzfas, but famous Paisik, of course. So these are Rear. And there's 5 of them, very important ones too. So this is again a nice item with a very low opening bid of $300.
Lot 80 is Shal Shuva Zichron Yosef. The reason this is by Rabbi Starnhart of Fjord, but the reason why this is a polemic is because in the introduction he goes after Hasidim, and he was, I believe, if I remember correctly, the brother-in-law of Rabbi Shai Pick, Berlin, and it was his wife, I think, was sister, and I think it's become known, he quotes his wife a number of times, so the Hasidim, I forget her name, they ended up calling it his wife's name, they make fun of the Sefer, but this is again, he was a Goyin, he was a yeshiva in Fjord, and Firth, the major yeshiva in Germany. Lot 82 was a real classic, the first edition of Bas Ayin. Bas Ayin today has become a big, famous Rebbe, Skula. This has become a big deal. Bas Ayin, obviously, a major Rebbe, Mary Choshev, Talmid Chacham, moved to Eretz Yisrael, didn't have children. And this also, Bas Ayin happens to have a beautiful title page. Yerushalayim, it has a beautiful picture on the title page of the Bas Ayin, the first edition. So this is very nice. This is printed in Yerushalayim 1847. And they say here it's the first Hasidic sefer printed in Eretz Yisrael, which would be quite interesting as well. That is the Bas Ayin.
Lot 84 is the two-part publication of the Kazhan Sur Magid on Gemara. I remember Rav Zevin wrote a very classic article against those who would say that Hasidim are Isaac in Kabbalah and in Drush, and they don't really learn, and they don't publish any works of Talmudic scholarship. So he cites this example, among many others, of this is the Kazhan Sur Magid's Chidushim on Masechtas, and it's a rare to have the first edition here from Warsaw. 1864 is the first, and 1876 is the second, and that is Lot 84.
Lot 97 has a full 2-page spread in the catalog, and rightfully so. It's Zera Shimshon. This is the first edition, Mantua 1778. And actually, there was a couple of months ago, I saw this copy, which is a beautiful copy, a new leather binding, there was a yeshiva, Mesifta Ner Moshe in Lakewood had a dinner, and every year by the dinner, together with Rabbi Yehuda Schwartz and Legacy Judaica, they bring out a number of classics. A very nice thing that the yeshiva dinner, you go out, and they put out a whole selection of antiques Farim and Kisviodas and things like that. And one of the items they had there was this Zera Shimshon, which Zera Shimshon by now I'm sure everybody knows. I don't need to say everyone is very familiar with the Zera Shimshon and the Skula, what he promises in the Sefer. Obviously, his son died, so he ended up, he didn't have children, and he promises this as Skula. And so, this has become a big deal. And so this is the first edition, Zera Shimshon. The starting bid on this is $10,000, but I know that it has a bid, so I think I should already mention what the bid is, at least when we're recording it. If it's above $10,000 already, I'm sure this is going to fetch much more. It has a bid of $12,000 right now when we're recording this. A couple of days before the auction. So this is, again, it's not only a beautiful leather binding, and it really is a pristine copy.
It's a pristine copy, and it's striking also how tall it is. It's 34 centimeters tall. I was shocked when I saw it.
It's a very, very tall sefer. You think of a big Gemara when you think of it. There's a nice little fruit basket on the Sharblatz and a nice Italian print. And so for those interested in Zera Shimshon, they want the original, you can check that out for sure. And that's Lot 97. Okay, jumping ahead to some other ones. So there's some other ones. They have some other classics. Tehillim Slavita is Lot 105, and there's a number of really classic. We mentioned before Zhatomer, Slavita, the Chassidish Press. So there's a number of really nice Chassidish Sfarim in here as well. Oftentimes we skip over the Chassidish Sfarim, being eventually we'll get to more Chassidish Sfarim slowly. There is a whole section on Holocaust in here. That's lots 118, 119, 120, 121. There's and more. And there's a nice section on Holocaust. And then there's Sfarim with signatures. Again, so it's really divided. This catalog, they really split things up differently. There's lot 129 is a Chavetz Chaim with Muga in it. So not only do we had the Mishnah Berurah earlier, there's also that. Lot 130, really historic, very fascinating, and really real discovery. Lot 130 is Reb David Deutsch, and it was actually owned by his father, also Menachem Mendel Deutsch. Noid Behuda Madura Kama, parts. Aleph, 2 Chalakim was 2. Madura Kam was 1 and 2, and Madura Kam 1 and 2 in a beautiful leather binding, a new edition. And this has, not a new edition, 1 volume, new binding, and this is over 60 glosses. Hagoyis never printed. Now, what's fascinating, what's so important, who's Reb David Deutsch? I'm sure many listeners have never heard of that. Who is that? I believe Shirley Bornstein, if listening, obviously into Noda B'Yehuda, he's mentioned David Deutsch. David Deutsch is the son, as we mentioned, of Nachum Mendel Deutsch. He is a Talmud Muvok, so one of the big Talmidim of the Noda B'Yehuda, which is what makes it so important. His father, they grew up in this whole area of, at the time, Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic and Hungary, moving around in the area. His father, there's actually, so David Deutsch wrote a sefer called Old David, Ala Torah. There's also on Mesechtes Shas. It recently was redone, literally a couple of months ago, in 2 volumes, and there's a really nice biography in the back there, and you can check out if anyone wants to know at length about Reb David Deutsch. And so Reb David Deutsch, he was a Talmud of the Noda B'Yehuda, and what's worth pointing out also is that his son-in-law was the Maramash, and he talks about his father-in-law. He says, "Akavli toides lavavi avarchu b'shem Hashem al ki hechel be'ez Hashem l'havi l'tvos." He brought a print. Dibros kodshe shel admu choisni harav hagoyin amitim afursim l'shem l'tehila marav Rabbeinu David Deutsch. That's real praise. Dover shenitzar lov oiset tzadik kol yom avshayoy achai esnei al pnei adama b'nichvus of gam kol senafshe etohayir l'hoitzil imiseres. He wasn't able to publish his things. Lo yelaman batzu betza. He didn't have money. He didn't have time. And he goes on that he couldn't publish his farm. And what's fascinating about Reb David Deutsch is he wrote Hagois, margin notes, on almost every sefer that he has. This is what he did. In fact, his Old David, he published it, and then I think it's over 60, I think, that are around that he wrote marginal notes on. So he, on his own work, he would write notes, and he would, I think he gave them out. So this is something that he did all the time. This is something that he would always do. And so he would, on his farm. So this is a thing. And it's what's worth pointing out also about him, about David Deutsch, is that we know a lot of his farm, and it's quoted. His manuscript handwriting is quoted. It's actually brought down. And this is brought down for one sefer. There's the Yehuda Yala, Yehuda Assad, Talmud of the Maimon Chabanet, Sefer. He writes in his Shuva Sefer, his son, actually, Rabbi Aaron Shmuel Assad, he writes, Shuv Matzasi, I found the Beis Ephraim al Trefus Hareya, in Beis Ephraim, Zamar Golis, V'sham nichte b'tzeidoi ksav yad. It's written on the side, a manuscript. Gam haroisi zeh sharti v'ksav yad shama hu me'agoyin marino David Deutsch. I've been Ir Chadash. He was a place Ir Chadash. He goes, David Deutsch's manuscript. Another place, Shlomo Gansfried, in his Sefer Pnei Shlomo, on Sanhedrin, that was printed by Mechon Yerushalayim, he says, look in Gdulei Truma, V'agoyin Rav David Deutsch, Old David, Kosav ala Gillian zal, Ad kan Lashon. He quotes him. So this is, and in the Maram Ash, in the Shal Shuvas Imrei Ash, he says, Kim Matzasi Begillian Shuvas Harashba Sheyeshli Maricha Me'agoyin Rav David Deutsch. So this is like many Sfarim. He's quoted. It's like weird. Even if you find like auctions all the time now, you see Sfarim. It's like, oh, we have some sort of manuscript handwriting, but it's quoted by other Gedolim. So this is like something that he did. The Tzlach, which the Noda B'Yehuda wrote. There's a one that also has, they talk about it. Also has, we have some with some of the Hagois in there. Actually, I think at some place it was incorporated. They printed some things that he told them. And also, I think I kind of missed saying the most important point about this. Many of the tshuvas in Noda B'Yehuda Kama were to Reb David Deutsch. So this is his auras on his own tshuvas. He asked his Rabbi Noda B'Yehuda this, and Noda B'Yehuda gave it teretz, and he wrote his Hagois. And then later on, things were, I guess he responded back as well. And so that's why it's so important. The Shiva Tzion of Shmuel Landau, who also was published in Noda B'Yehuda, a lot of it. He wrote back to him. There's things in there from him. He also wrote to the. He also wrote, and worth mentioning what the Noda B'Yehuda tells him in Shuvas. He says, "Ahuvi talmidi yididi v'chavivi harav hamuflo umuflik b'Torah Marin Rav David Neroi." He says, and he says, and he says, I want to answer you. Right away when your letter came to me, I wrote right away an answer. And he says, I wasn't well, so I couldn't write down, I couldn't look into the sugya properly. I wanted to write about it. So this is a big Talmud of Noda B'Yehuda. Really, and it's a very important discovery. I don't know that these were ever published in the new edition of Noda B'Yehuda. So this is again a very, very important thing. This is a Talmud of the Noda B'Yehuda, and so well worth pointing out, a very important sefer that this is a lot again 130 with an opening bid of $8,000. So then lot 131 is a Mari Ben Lev of Rabbi Akiva Eger, meaning of Rabbi Akiva Eger. This is the Mari Ben Lev of the Mari Ben Lev. Rabbi Akiva Eger, it was Rabbi Akiva Eger's copy. It has, I think, one Hagah of Rabbi Akiva Eger. So this is an opening bid of $8,000, which is, for Rabbi Akiva Eger's handling and Shas. Lot 133 is a Igros Moshe or Moshe Feinstein and a David Feinstein. It's inscribed by both of them, which is something that's very nice as well.
Lot 146. I'm jumping ahead. That's another item we saw in person at this event, and this is Rav Meir Shapiro's Rambam, with a lot of they counted it. There's over 360 Haggais from Rav Meir Shapiro. Rav Meir Shapiro, of course, needs no introduction. Everybody listening knows Rav Meir Shapiro from Chachmei Lublin and Daf Yomi. This is his Rambam that he used. It's the Berlin copy from 1862. It's worn and used like a well used siddur or a tehillim. It's something that he used a lot. It has Avodas Yom Kippurim in this particular chelik, and that has a lot of his agoy. So very very chashuv item, well preserved with also a handsome nice leather binding. And this one starts at also $10,000.
This one, so I saw recently when I went to look at the catalogs before Yom Tov from Rabbi Yehuda Schwartz, Legacy Judaica. This one is, looking through this, it's really cool to see because Rav Meir Shapiro, so for those that want to read more, Davi Safir has an article, A Light from Lublin, that he wrote in Mishpacha magazine a few years ago, and you can see that online. And Rav Meir Shapiro was in Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, and he ran around. He wasn't just sitting there. This was his copy. It's a large size, and it's just full of Haggais. And you can see how worn it is. It's in good condition, but you can see how worn it is, that how well used it is, besides all those notes of Rav Meir Shapiro that are on there. I believe these were printed, I think, at one point in he had a relative that did publish them at one point, but it's really fascinating, and especially for those interested in such a thing to see it. So that, and you can see a picture of it. This is lot 146. Jumping ahead to another interesting item is really there's a lot more. Where do you want to go next, Moshe? Where do you want to go?
Let's see lot 153. It's the Bnei Yisachar, and this is this a copy that was given as a wedding present by Reb Michal Ber Weissmandel to one of his students, and Reb Michal Ber writes, first of all, very nice inscription there. He had he was you see here, he was Reb Michal Ber. Those who know, he was such a talented and colorful kind of person. Of course, he's most famous for his tireless work at Hatzalah, which went largely unheeded. The unheeded cry, that's his sefer. But just an all around a once in a generation kind of person, just with all his talents and abilities, and he's famous for the Bible codes, which he'd compute in his head, the numbers. An amazing person, but very poetic too. And this is you see his poetry here. He refers to the chassan as Chasan Tamim Lema'alois, which is a play on Chasan Damim Lemulois in Sefer Shmois. So it's and then what's in addition to the inscription, there's also a bunch of lines here where he talks about the content of the Bnei Yisachar. The Bnei Yisachar is in this kind of sefer, and therefore it's appropriate to give you as a wedding gift, as a harbinger for a life full of blessing and spirituality. Nice little inscription there as well.
And then we get into rabbinical letters manuscript. This is something that's always interesting to see letters. That those that just collect letters, some like letters, manuscript. And it depends what they say in them. Also, there are some really, really interesting ones in here. Lot 155 is the Chafetz Chaim, the Machzikei Das of London. This is read in 1931, one of the later letters of the Chafetz Chaim. And so this has an opening bid of 8,000, but I saw it already. There's already bids on this online, as I don't remember where it's holding. Just worth mentioning. Ramesh, which letters did you want to highlight here for the listeners?
Lot 164 is it's a tshuva from the aforementioned Reb Shlomo Eger. It's signed it's interesting. It's signed in his Hebrew script and also signed in Latin script. Solomon Eger, he signs it there. Very interesting. But it's a tshuva. It's a tshuva about making matzah. How to do it the proper way, and some of these issues are still pertinent today. So it's an interesting tshuva, and this is even the Sfarim that they published from Shlomo Eger are hard to find. Kal v'chomer, his handwriting, tshuva in his handwriting is very, very rare. So that's a chashuv item.
It's
Go
also
ahead.
worth mentioning 162. It's funny. We made a couple of connections before, and I feel like every time we do these, there's always a number of connections. And sometimes they're obvious, sometimes they're not as obvious. They just come up. And lot 162 is it's a decorated dedication. Chaver Kadisha, which we're talking before, Chaver Kadisha L'Chavod Adenenu V'Rabbeinu, and this is for Menachem Deutsch. Menachem Deutsch is an anicle and a Talmud of Rab David Deutsch, the old David, who we just were discussing before. So it's interesting, and this is a lot 162. And you can see it has the acrostic going down. It's written in big, nice ink. L'Chavod, I can almost like Ksavashuris. It's written very nice. They did a very nice job. Whoever wrote this. So this has an opening bid of $200. And then there's a fascinating item that we'll get to right now, I think, which is worth, Ramosha, I know you want to talk about this. Lot 165, Ramosha Feinstein. As I'll read the description says, historic autograph letter regarding Bible criticism. This is New York, 1971. So what's going on in this letter from Ramosha?
This is it's a unique letter. Everybody knows that haskamas of Ramosha are not so rare because Ramosha had a shita that if he can do chesed by giving an author a haskama, he was going to do it. So almost everybody who came to asking for haskama would get one. But this letter is a rejection. It's a rare rejection letter from Ramosha, and this is for a sefer that was subsequently published. This is a sefer called Al HaHalacha V'Al HaKalkala, regarding halacha and maybe, for lack of a better term, parnasa, or the financial abilities or economical abilities. What that title is, it's a reference to. It becomes very clear when you open the sefer. This is a sefer written by Moshe Zev Uspis from Miami, and this sefer takes on the primary focus is not Bible criticism, but the Wissenschaft study of Torah Sheba'al Peh, which the point he makes right away is that the Wissenschaft, the historical study of Judaism, views Torah Sheba'al Peh as a fluid kind of developing phenomenon, not as opposed to the traditional viewpoint, which sees Torah Sheba'al Peh as given me Sinai. These writers view Torah Sheba'al Peh as something that developed in response to the economic needs of the times. So that's al halacha v'al kalkala. The point of the sefer is to rebut them and say that it's false. From internal proofs, it's false to claim that the halacha is dynamic and a result of the realities of the time. Rather, it's halachas misinai. But to write this rebuttal, he does quote them extensively. He quotes them and rebuts them, and to that, Ramosha felt is unconscionable, and he lays it out in his letter to response to Rabbi Espis. He says, "You're a very wonderful guy, and if you write a sefer on halacha, just halacha, I'd love to give you haskama, but I can't not countenance writing a sefer which quotes these apikorsim." And even if it's just to rebut them, because the reader will walk away with the impression that there's two sides to the story. They say this, you say that, and that legitimizes them. We can't even have that. We can't even have that discussion with them. This really harkens back to the old, the question of confrontation and serving on the synagogue council with Reform rabbis, where the Rabbanim had taken a stance in the 60s that there's no dialogue in an official capacity because that justifies Reform and conservative. So Ramesh is kind of staking out the same claim here that I can't give a haskam on a sefer which is going to, even for the purpose of rebutting them, but it does grant them a degree of legitimacy, and he can't do that. There is a hint of Bible criticism here as well, because Ramesh makes this point as well, that the sefer does turn to Koheles. And here Ramesh writes, he says, your language needs fixing because you apparently were influenced by the very people you're coming to rebut on the way you talk about Koheles in a less than appropriate way. So he said, he ends off very mechubadik. He says, I'd love to, give you haskam on the halacha sefer, but I cannot give you a haskam on this sefer. I don't tell you what to do, but I can't have my name associated with this. So the rabbi did go and publish the sefer. He got haskam from Rav Ovadia and some others, including Rav Zevin gave him haskam. But Ramosha's haskam, of course, was not included. And as far as we know, this letter was never published before. It's a really interesting letter. First of all, Ramosha's letters are very much sought after, but the content of this letter is stark and of great interest.
So this is lot 165. There's an opening bid of $3,000. You can see it in the catalog online, although it's blurred, so you can't see some of it. You can see some of the letter. It reminds me of the fight in Germany in the late 19th century between Rav Hirsch and Rav Hildesheimer in the Berlin Seminary. I mean, this is something that came up even in the art school biography of Rav Hirsch. You can read about this. They write about this. That in Berlin, and Rav Hildesheimer, then Rav David Tzvi Hoffman, this is what they did. Anyone opens Rav David Tzvi Hoffman's Shiurim on Chumash that have been printed, Shmoyis and V'yirka been redone, he called the time. He quotes the Bible critics, and he goes after them, and he attacks them. And this is what the Berlin Seminary did. Rav Hirsch felt, no, this is wrong. We don't do that. We do not deal with it. We don't reckon with koifrim and kvira. And this is kind of different ideologies, different opinions. That's what this Ramesh reminds me of.
In that same book, and again, you're looking for connections. There's also the connection to Shir. Shir also got into a scuffle with Rav Hirsch because Rav Hirsch attacked Zechariah Frankel from the Breslau Seminary.
Darkei Mishnah.
Right. And in Darkei Mishnah, Frankel does subscribe to this viewpoint of halacha as a dynamic, evolving kind of process. And Rav Hirsch says, well, if you're saying that means you don't think it's Sinai. And if you disagree with me, I want you to publicly declare that you do believe it's from Sinai. And Frankel declined to do so. He never made that public declaration at Rav Hirsch's behest. And that's where Shir got in. Shir jumped into the fray and says, "Why are you attacking Frankel? He doesn't have to make any declaration just because you say he does. He doesn't have to. Of course, he believes in Torah Sinai." And that's sort of Hirsch and Shir became enemies from that point on.
Rav Hirsch also had Rav Tzvi Hoffman, who taught I believe, after a time in Frankfurt, he ended up attacking him. Rav Hirsch wrote his dissertation on Mar Shmuel, and Rav Hirsch also wasn't happy about that. So, for
the same reason, he felt he detected that same influence in Mar Shmuel, where Rav David Tzvi refers to different positions taken by Shmuel in response to the realities of the time. And according to Rav Hirsch, it's totally off limits to say that any of the halacha is response to any on the ground factors.
Yeah, they're totally not related to the Ramesh that we're talking about 165, but I think an interesting conversation nonetheless, and that's worth discussing as well. And so, like I said, we're really skimming over because there's 249 lots. There's lot 168 is a letter of Rav Tzvi Hirsch Ferber from London. I've done a podcast episode on him in the past. There's lot 171 is Reb Chaim Yosef Grodzinski. And what's interesting about this is in the English signature. Reb Chaim Yosef was writing this to America, so there is a English signature of Reb Chaim Yosef. That's lot 171. There's a lot of letters in here. Rav Henkin, there's Rav Henkin, a Bechiras Chametz, New York, 1961. If that, sometimes you get these like quirky, little quirky, funky things. Yeah,
it's quirky. And the nusach here that he's using was taken from Chuvas Beis Av from Rav Yudalevich, an earlier American rabbi, very colorful one as well. He uses that nusach for the shtar, and then he adds his own writing underneath. Which this is they're publishing Rav Henkin's Torah now. This should be something that they would definitely want to see because this is Rav Henkin's own shtar mechiras chametz, which has a lot of halachic import.
We were just talking about Rav Hirsch, so lot 176 is Rav Shamshval Hirsch and Rav Gershon Posen, Frankfurt 1886, signed by them, the German. So that's an interesting, more connections, I guess, throughout over here. Other ones worth discussing. I mean, there's some of the things. Lot 181 is Reb Chaim Kanievsky with a receipt for learning Mishnayos in memory of Reb Chaim Yaakov Halper. They have a receipt and it's signed by Reb Chaim Kanievsky. I mean, kind of interesting, but in some ways, but
maybe not as interesting as the next lot, 182.
No.
182 is a full sefer Kilos Yaakov on Elu Trefas from 1950. This is the original Kilos Yaakov in manuscript form, bound in a nice, beautiful leather binding. This is it's the full sefer. It's the first original sefer.
It's just an Elu Trefas, though.
Yeah. This is the one he learned there, and it's you see the whole thing in his writing. It includes some names of some of the donors. He wrote them in there with L'Refuah Shalema for Aaron Ben Zlat Rachel. This is in real time actually sitting and learning and writing the sefer. Very rare to have. A lot of the time, there's so many. What happened to all the manuscripts for all these published form? I don't know. They disappear somehow. But here you actually have one. You have the original full manuscript for this Perek Elu Trefas by the Stipler, starting at the very reasonable price of $10,000.
Yeah. Lot 184 is another one that there's actually a bid. I'm going to check. There is a bid on this already, and no surprise. It's a letter of Rav Aaron Kotler written to London when he's still in Kletsk. So this has a bid. It has opening bid. The opening bid is irrelevant. It's already bid. There's already a bid of $500 on this letter. It's from Rav Aaron. And it's, again, this is just to a donor, Mr. Williams, thanking him for his donation in the support of Yeshivas Kletsk, and it has a stamp, an Rav Aaron stamp. So that's an interesting... A lot of these letters from them, it's just thanking them for support and for giving money. You have another letter, Lot 185, Rabbi Baruch Ber and Reuven Grozovsky wrote it. Lot 186 is a massive Lemberg document. It's many, many signatures. Again, there's really a lot of letters in here. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman has a letter in Lot 189. So you have Rabbi Yehuda Miller. Interestingly, I was reading a book recently. I didn't know Rabbi Yehuda Miller, Jewish Rabbi Yehuda Miller, that was published by Mechon Yerushalayim. He's not well known. He's 1661, 1751. But there's a letter, Lot 190. But actually, it's Rabbi Yehuda Miller. I think is how I saw it. I don't know. I'm curious if it's really Miller or Meller. So this is Germany from that. This is an earlier tkufa in Germany. Lot 191 is very interesting. Lot 191 is Moletzes Gdei Torah. It's a proclamation against Sheirut Leumi, 1953. And there's the signatures alone, besides for what it is, what the letter is about, is fascinating. The signatures of Rabbi Zalman, Rabbi Saul Alters, the Beis Yisrael, Rabbi Yehuda Finkel, and a number of others as well. So this is the Shemina Rav and some others. So this is and it's written to the chief rabbinate. This is by Rav Herzog, and they're talking about the Sheirut Leumi draft law. So this is something that's very pertinent still today. This is still going on, and so this is the opening bid of $4,000, lot 191.
Very good. Next item we mentioned 196 is the autograph by Shir. 197 is a personal letter from the Rogatchover. This is written to Reb David Potash. Other letters of the Rogatchover to Reb David Potash exist, including in the brand new book on the brand new English edition of
translation
of the biography on the Rogatchover. There they do mention Reb David Potash. Reb David Potash had a rare personal relationship with the Rogatchover. The Rogatchover, everything is Torah, and even his personal letters are infused with Torah. But he had a certain chavivus for Reb David Potash, and Reb David Potash was like a friend of his, and he speaks to him very warm. And this is one such letter written to Reb David, a very warm personal letter, very unique to have such an item. That's item 197, starting at $2,000.
Yeah, and there's a lot of letters. I think I don't know, is there like 40 letters or something? I'm just like trying to see, but there's a lot of letters in here.
A lot of rare ones too. There's a letter from the Imre Moshe Sokolovsky, a very big full letter in lot 202. That's a rare item. You don't see a lot of those.
Letter from the Surya Yesh, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, 216. And again, to just go through, we could just spend the podcast just going through these letters and reading all the letters. And again, some of them are boring. Just saying thank you for money or whatever it is. And I think that's also, I was told by a collector of letters, it really matters also the letter, what it says in the letter. Just saying, thank you for the money, buy is not really worth as much as something that's says more.
Something with some content. For example, lot 215, right before the one you just mentioned, is Rabbi Chanan Wasserman writing to the father of the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva. And in the beginning, he talks about what went with the get. What accompanied the letter was a box of matzah. And the box of matzah, he says that the Rabbi Chanan writes to what's his name? Moshe Yitzchak Segel, who's the original Rosh Yeshiva of Manchester, father of Yehuda Zev Segel. And he writes to him, he says, I'm sending you matzah. Now I know I should really be sending you shmura mishas ketzira, the most shmura it could possibly be, but the only shmura matzah mishas ketzira available here in Baranovich is chadash. And I know you're makbid on Yoshin, so therefore I'm sending you only shmura mishas techina. It's an interesting side thing you don't see in every letter from Rabbi Chanan. It's a rare. It's also personal and very mentions his son. It's a very beautiful and personal letter. And there's an extra addendum here where the mashgiach of the yeshiva, Rabbi Shaul Yankov Luchansky, who's writing, also very rare. But here there's a postscript from him as well in this letter in lot 215.
Lot 222 is Rabbi Akiva Yosef, Rabbi Kollel, writing a letter against the establishment of Kollel America. He wrote against it, and this is signed. This was a dispute, and they discussed it here. And they went to the Bezdin, and Rabbi Akiva Yosef Bezdin, he ruled in favor of the established Kollelim, and he prohibited Kollel America, and it's signed by Rabbi Akiva Yosef, as well as a number of other Rabbanim. So you can see the full psak signed with and this one actually you can see the whole letter. They put the whole letter. It's and also the content here is very, very interesting. The way the old yeshiv worked is that there were different koilim, and communities would contribute to their koil. Like Koil Ungarin was all the money raised in Hungary would go to Koil Ungarin, and Koil Ungarin would support Hungarian scholars and Hungarian families in Yerushalayim. And then there was the Koil Lita and the Koil Russia, and the different koils of would the contributions from this country would go to the people who hailed from that country. So
America said, well, there's a lot of, at this point in time, it's 1897, there's a significant amount of Americans now living in Eretz Yisrael. We want to support the Americans. Let's start a Koil America. And that's, America, besides for providing a few Talmidei Chacham to Yerushalayim, it was already a very big source of income for the other Koilim as well. So they said, one second, if all the money in America is going to go specifically to Koil America, that's going to hurt the other funds. It's going to hurt Ungarin, it's going to hurt the Koil Russia, Vilna, and any other Koil who also relies very heavily on contributions from America. So therefore, they took this, the one who had tried to start a Koil America. They took him to the Bezdin, and Bezdin in America. This is Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, the chief rabbi of New York. He said the other Koilim are right. It's going to hurt them, and of course, the greater good demands that you don't start a Koil America. A very unique historical document. Anything from Rabbi Yaakov Yosef is rear, and this is countersigned by the other Rabbanim of the Bezdin, including the Rav Hillel Klein, who's famous, and some other Rabbanim. A very important, unique, and rear document.
So lot 225 to the end is ceremonial art silver. So this is really interesting. It's something that we haven't discussed much. Many of the auction catalogs we've discussed don't have any of these items. Usually it's a separate, art auction. And also it's sometimes hard to discuss these items or, no visualization involved on a podcast. One day maybe the SwarmChatter YouTube channel will do something. But there are some beautiful items. So first of all, anyone interested should go look at online. There's going to be viewings as well. You can contact Judaica and you can look, again, you can see in the catalogs as well. But there are a number of items, 227 and 228 are two ksubas from Ancona, from Italy, back in the day. I don't know if again, try to visualize if you're familiar with these illustrated ksubas. They really were beautiful. They were, written by hand. It was like looks like a manuscript. Looks like I think of like a Torah, Sefer Torah, mezuzah, and it has beautiful. They always have all different styles with colors, and they're really it's art. It's a piece of art, essentially, really, and it's really nice. I don't know. Now you just go to the store. Most people pick up the ksuba and you fill it in, $2 ksuba, and that's it. You don't do this whole thing. But back in the day, they would have really nice. There's some really nice silver in here. Silver Torah plates. There's a becher. There's some really nice lot 234 is striking. Again, this is Sfarim chatter, not art or something chatter. I'm really not an expert in that at all. But 234 is beautiful. Magnificent spice box, a tower, Mainz 1716. You can see the detail. And this is just beautiful.
It's amazing, and it does relate it somewhat to Sfarim and books because, you'll read these classics of Eastern European literature, like for example, Glickel of Hamlin.
Yeah.
So it's very important. She's always describing what gift was given for what, and these are very important items. These heirlooms, these family heirlooms. And Glickel lived not at the end of her life. She lived not far from Mainz in 1716. Where did she live again, Nachi?
She went to Metz.
Metz,
she went to France, but yes. At this time, she was. So the truth is, you can see some of this.
She could be describing something like this, where she talks about, the family owns this, and these things were very precious, and they associated a lot of sentimental value to these things. Besides for the actual value, this is about a foot high. This besamim box, a beautiful item like this was known throughout the town, and this is it's a piece of history.
Lot 238, I'm curious, I don't know, I want to know how it made it here. It's the catalog, how it made it to America. Lot 238 is a Kishalio, a bris milah chair of a community from Hungary from 1910. And it's a nice, big, huge bris milah chair. I mean, how does that make it in? How does someone brought it after? How does that end up here? That's what I'm curious. I didn't ask Rabbi Yehuda. How did this, I don't know. But that's, it's really a huge chair with kind of the red, with looks like a flower design. That's in here. There's an old shofar in lot 241. Lot 243 has the Shabbos, the lamps from Germany, the Shabbos lamp. You can see this is something you can spot. Lot 2, you see them time to time. Lot 244 is an etching of Rav David Oppenheim, Prague, 1773. I will mention there are some very nice paintings. Lot 246, Rabbi Akiva Eger, is a needlepoint. Someone made a beautiful needlepoint of Akiva Eger. They wrote circa 19th century, and it says Eger Rabin on the bottom, and it's a picture of Akiva Eger, and it's a needlepoint in a frame. That's very nice. Lot 246, the opening bid of $1,000. Lot 249 also is cute. The final item is Sir Moses Montefiore. Montefiore is the old man beneficent. This is New York, 1883. This is a Harper's Magazine. Harper's Magazine had about Sir Moses Montefiore, and at the time, I think he was almost 100 at that time when they published the Harper's Magazine. They have him with his cane sitting there. This opening bid of $100. Gee, if anyone wants an old edition of Harper's, which I think is still in publication. I think, is it? But this is with Sir Moses in there. So this is, again, a very nice catalog. We tried to jump around and mention a couple of different things, and some more in depth, some less. And we ran over an hour anyways. Just getting to the items, 249 items. So again, this episode sponsored by Legacy Judaica, so thank you to them. You can check it out on BidSpirit. There'll be a link in the show's notes. You can also check it out. There's a catalog if you're interested. It's again Sunday, November 3rd, 1 p.m. at Estrella in Lakewood, 978 River Avenue, Lakewood, New Jersey, 08701. You can also check it out online, like I said. And so, you can register now and bid now and to check out the items.
I'd love to come down myself, and if you make it down there, come say hi.
Yeah, if I make it there as well, anyone who will be there, definitely come over. So with that, thank you, Moshe, and thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Auction Chatter.
Thank you very much, and best of luck to all of you.